So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, yesterday we talked about Aidan Hutchinson, the edge rusher out of Michigan, and whether or not he would be the right pick for the Detroit Lions at the number 2 overall selection. And you guys seem to enjoy that video quite a lot, so we're back here yet again with another scouting report, and I am here to tell you that Kyle Hamilton is not only the best player in the 2022 draft class, but he's the best player in America. The 6'4", 220-pound safety in his career with the Notre Dame Fighting Irish totaled over 138 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 8 interceptions, including one of those that went for a pick six, and he took back to the end zone in his freshman year for his only collegiate touchdown, and he had 16 more passes defended. On top of that, he dominated the collegiate level for 3 straight seasons, being a 3-year starter for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish in that secondary. And in those 3 years, he had not only elite production, but he has an elite ceiling, he has unlimited potential, and he is simply the best player in America. And so today we're going to talk about Kyle Hamilton. We're going to go over his pros, the few cons that he does have, and the fit that he would have with this Detroit Lions team, and why he should be the number 2 overall selection. So without any further ado, let's get on to the pros of consensus All-American and safety from Notre Dame, Kyle Hamilton. Now, Kyle Hamilton has a lot of pros in his game and has very, very few weaknesses to his game. I would say he is the generational talent of this draft class. He is the one guy that stands far above anybody else. He's better than Kayvon Thibodeaux. He's better than Aidan Hutchinson. He's better than Malik Willis or Matt Corral. He's better than, Derek Stingley or Eric Booth Jr. He is the best player by far in this year's draft class. Now, starting off with some of his bigger pros, Kyle Hamilton has the perfect build for the NFL. As I mentioned earlier, he's 6'4", 220 pounds, and has extremely long arms. His arms are abnormally long for a player at that position, and just for a human being in general, he has very long arms, which allows him to get his hands on the football a lot. The first play that I watched in the Purdue game was an out route to the boundary, and Kyle Hamilton, being nearly 10 yards away from this wide receiver, was able to jump in between the ball and the wide receiver and get his hands on it, tip the football, and force the incomplete pass. And if Kyle Hamilton had been able to catch that football cleanly, he would have taken it back for a pick six for his second career touchdown. But unfortunately, he didn't catch the ball, but he made a phenomenal athletic effort, and it was almost superhuman to even get that hand on the football, let alone almost catch it for an interception and a pick six. He has phenomenal length, and his arms are really, really long, which allows him to get a lot of pass breakups and allows him to take advantage of some tip passes and allows him to just simply outreach wide receivers and tight ends to the football more times than not. Another thing that kind of goes along with his build and just him being overall a really, really well-built player is he's versatile. Kyle Hamilton is not only a safety at Notre Dame. That's his primary position. That's where he plays his best football, and that's where he's going to be drafted and play in the NFL. But there was not a game to go by where Kyle Hamilton didn't play snaps at safety, linebacker, and slot cornerback for the Fighting Irish. He did all 3 at an incredibly high level. He played safety at his best position, but linebacker, if he was just a pure linebacker, I would draft him probably late in the first round, if not early in the second round, because he can play linebacker almost as well as anybody else in the country. And then you look at him in the slot, right? Yeah, he's 6'4". He's a big guy to play in the slot, but he locks down slot wide receivers, guys that are shifty and speedy, guys with free releases off the line that are just, that spot, that position is designed to get open. Kyle Hamilton is within inches of those slot receivers and tight ends every single time he's matched up in man coverage against them. He plays all three positions at an extremely high level, and if he played any of those three positions full time, he'd be an easy day one selection at either corner, linebacker, or the safety position. Now, Kyle Hamilton, as I said, just simply erases people from the game, right? When you see him at safety, you see him as that middle safety, that guy that's just a high, deep, free safety. You never see a seam ball. In the 5 games that I watched for Kyle Hamilton against the 2020 Alabama Crimson Tide, the 2020 Clemson Tigers, the 2021 Florida State team, the 2021 Purdue team, and the 2022 Cincinnati Bearcats teams, 3 of those teams of which made the college football playoff in their respective year, not once was Kyle Hamilton tested down the seam. Mac Jones, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Waddle never tested him down the seam. Cincinnati, with their really, really good tight end and Desmond Ridder, who might be a day one quarterback, never, ever tested Kyle Hamilton down the seam. Clemson, Trevor Lawrence, the consensus #1 pick and the consensus best player in the draft class a year ago, did not test Kyle Hamilton once down the seams. Kyle Hamilton pretty much erases everything from numbers to numbers more than 15 yards down the field, and you never see him get tested. You never see anything go Kyle Hamilton's way because he's simply that dominant that if you test him even once, he can force a turnover and he can change the script of a game like that. Now, another part of Kyle Hamilton's game where he absolutely excels is his instincts and his film study. It is very evident that he is an instinctual player, and it is very evident that he watches a lot of film on the opposing offense because he just sees things really, really quickly. I mean, he diagnoses screens, he diagnoses concepts, he knows where wide receivers are going to be, and it's just very, very evident that his football IQ is extremely high because of his research, preparation, and natural instincts for the football game. The one play that really stood out to me the most was a 4th and 1 play versus the Purdue Boilermakers about midway through the second quarter, almost into halftime. It was 4th and 1. The Boilermakers ran a reverse where they flipped it back to a wide receiver coming back across the field away from where all the defenders was. Kyle Hamilton immediately saw it, almost saw it before the flip actually happened, and by the time the wide receiver had the ball in his hands, Kyle Hamilton was already driving on him and made a really, really clean tackle for loss behind the line of scrimmage to force a turnover on downs and get the ball back to the Notre Dame offense. His instincts and his film study are phenomenal, and they're one of the most underrated parts of Kyle Hamilton's game. Now, we're not even done with the pros yet. Kyle Hamilton is an elite athlete. As an 18-year-old kid, his youth trainer marked him with a 40-inch vertical, an 11-foot broad jump, and the fastest 10-yard split ever by an 18-year-old. Not to mention he's incredibly fluid in his hips, changes direction incredibly well, and just overall has elite range as a safety. With his athleticism, with his flexibility, and his change of direction, Kyle Hamilton has elite range. He can cover numbers to numbers. He can cover far hash to boundary. Wherever he is on the field, he can get to where the ball is going by the time the ball gets there. And the perfect example of that is his second interception versus the Florida State Seminoles in 2021. Kyle Hamilton was on the far side of the field. He was on the far hash when this ball was thrown. The quarterback rolled out. Travis Hunter rolled out to his right, threw a ball down the boundary on the sidelines. The ball would have landed out of bounds if it was not caught. Threw a ball very much near the sideline, almost to the point where it was out of bounds. Kyle Hamilton, when the ball was released from Travis Hunter's hands, was on the near hash mark. So in the rollout, he went from far hash to near hash, and when the ball left Travis Hunter's hands, he was on the near hash. The ball traveled 20, maybe 30 yards in the air, and Kyle Hamilton got to the sideline, caught the ball, got his feet down for the interception. It is one of the most phenomenal interceptions I've ever seen, and it is one of the most impressive displays of athleticism in football that you may ever see. Kyle Hamilton did it twice in that game. He did it twice. He is one of the best athletes that I have ever seen and that I have ever scouted, and he has the instincts and ball skills to go along with it, not to mention his coverage is phenomenal, whether it be in man or in zone. Now, a couple notes to take away, a couple things that I just jotted down that I didn't think were really pros or cons, just some really, really interesting things about him. He was never targeted. I mentioned that in the 5 games that I watched versus 2019 Alabama, 2019 Clemson, 2020 Cincinnati, all 3 teams of which made the college football playoffs in their respective seasons, and the Florida State Seminoles and the Purdue Boilermakers that were ranked at the end of 2021, none of those teams tested Kyle Hamilton. Kyle Hamilton hasn't been tested down the seam since his first year in college, and he hasn't been tested down the seam in 2, almost 3 full seasons at the collegiate level. Because if you throw a seam ball versus Kyle Hamilton, it's going to get picked off 10 times out of 10. He's too explosive. He's too athletic. He's too dynamic. He changes directions far too well for you to test him down the seam. And anything more than 15 yards down the field between the numbers is Kyle Hamilton's territory. And it's just simply unthrowable because Kyle Hamilton can get to every single ball that you're going to throw, right? Kyle Hamilton is on the far hash and you want to throw it to the opposite side boundary 40 yards down the field. You better make a perfect throw to a 4-3 wide receiver who has a step on his man, because otherwise, if it's not a perfect throw, if it's slightly overthrown, slightly underthrown, Kyle Hamilton's going to be there for a pass breakup or maybe even an interception. There is no place on the field that is out of range for Kyle Hamilton, and I think one of the craziest things about Kyle Hamilton is what Brian Kelly thinks of him in the way he described Kyle Hamilton as a safety. Now, when they were playing Florida State while having a phenomenal game, Brian Kelly described Kyle Hamilton as a mixture of a couple different NFL greats over the past couple of decades. He described him as having the athleticism of Sean Taylor, the instincts of Tyrann Mathieu, the sideline speed of Jamal Adams, and the mentality of Ed Reed. Yeah, you heard that right. Athleticism of Sean Taylor, instincts of Tyrann Mathieu, mentality of Ed Reed. That's how his coach described him. That is how Kyle Hamilton was described by the head coach that recruited him and trained him and coached him for 3 whole years at the University of Notre Dame. Sean Taylor is maybe one of the most athletic safeties in NFL history. Ed Reed is arguably the greatest safety in NFL history, and a huge part of his game was because of the mentality that he had. And then you go to the instincts. Tyrann Mathieu is one of the most instinctual players in the entire NFL right now, current day. You take all 3 of the best traits of those safeties together, and you're essentially getting Kyle Hamilton in the eyes of Brian Kelly. And that comparison isn't even that far-fetched because he has a phenomenal mentality when it comes to, just being a player. He tackles really well. He's not afraid to hit people. He's not a thumper. He's not somebody that's going to force a bunch of fumbles. He's not going to be somebody that lays people out consistently, right? He's not a Cam Chancellor, but he's a guy that tackles really, really well, has had some solid hits here and there throughout his college career. Nothing crazy, right? I don't think he even forced a fumble in college, but that's not his game. His game is to be that elite coverage safety, is to be that Ed Reed, to be that Troy Polamalu, and those are the comparisons that I think come the closest to what we have here in Kyle Hamilton. Now, with that being said, Kyle Hamilton is of course not without flaws. There is no prospect that is completely 100% perfect at anything and everything. There were the occasional reps, especially on screen passes versus speedier wide receivers, where Kyle Hamilton would take a pretty poor angle, right? Would get his hands on the wide receiver. It's not like he'd flat out miss, but there are just some occasions where he'll take a poor angle to a wide receiver on a screen pass, or he'll take a poor, angle to a running back when it comes to run defending. And it's not anything that is the worst part about his game. It's not anything that I'm concerned about, right? Because it doesn't happen a lot, right? But, in the 2020 college football playoff in the Rose Bowl, when they played Alabama, there was a screen pass to Devontae Smith that he took for a touchdown. And a big part of why he was able to score that touchdown is because Kyle Hamilton took a poor angle of the tackle and wasn't able to wrap up against Devontae Smith. And Devontae Smith obviously went on to be a top 15 pick in the NFL draft, won the Heisman Trophy that year, and was the best player in college football. So, sure, when your only real mistake of your collegiate career comes against a Heisman candidate and a Heisman winner, that's not that bad. And that's really the only con that I saw out of Kyle Hamilton, is occasionally against guys that are faster than him, he on occasion takes a poor angle to tackle. And that's it. That's the only con that I have. There was only really maybe 3-4 negative plays in all 5 games combined where I felt like Kyle Hamilton wasn't perfect on the play. You know, the one was against Florida State where they took a deep boundary shot early in the football game. It was a big time throw. It was a huge touchdown pass to a 4-3 wide receiver down the boundary. The receiver had a step on the cornerback. Kyle Hamilton was on the far hash when the ball was released, and he had to cover probably 30-40 yards of ground by the time the ball was in the air, and he was, you know, maybe a yard or two away from making the tackle, maybe a yard or two away from getting the pass breakup. But it took a perfect throw to a wide receiver that has legit 4-3 speed that also had a step on his cornerback on the boundary, opposite boundary side of the field from where Kyle Hamilton was, to beat him on a route and to beat him deep. That's the kind of throws that he forces offenses to make. That is the kind of throw that you have to make if you want to score a big play on Notre Dame, and if you want to score a big play with Kyle Hamilton patrolling the middle safety position. Now, with that being said, I want to talk about Kyle Hamilton's fit and Kyle Hamilton's role and what the defense would look like with Kyle Hamilton manning the safety 1 position. So Kyle Hamilton, there's no question that he's going to fit into this defense, right? He is good enough to fit anywhere. He can start as a linebacker. He can start as a cornerback. He can even start as a safety. He can start as a safety, a linebacker, or even a cornerback in this defense, right? You put Kyle Hamilton at any spot, he'll probably beat out whoever's there, right? I mean, he might not beat out Amani Oruwariye, but Kyle Hamilton immediately will become our best safety and probably our best linebacker unless we sign somebody in free agency. But Kyle Hamilton is really good at everything. So, I mean, you can play him at safety, which is, I think, where he's going to play the most, but you can also sub him in at linebacker, and you can very easily sub him in at slot cornerback if you're having trouble there as well. You know, and I think just the role that Kyle Hamilton can play in this defense is unmatchable by anybody else in this draft class, because you are going to say, and people are going to say, positional value is the reason that you can't draft a safety at number 2. Kyle Hamilton as a safety is going to be more impactful to the game for the Detroit Lions than Hutchinson ever will be, than Kayvon ever will be, and maybe even more impactful than a quarterback's going to be with the number 2 overall selection. Kyle Hamilton will be the most best player at number 2. He will, if he falls to number 2, there's a possibility that Kyle Hamilton goes with the number 1 overall pick because he's really simply that good. But the impact Kyle Hamilton has will be unmatched by anybody else in this draft class because Aiden Hutchinson does not erase 70% of the field. Kayvon Thibodeaux does not erase 70% of the field. Derek Stingley does not erase 70% of the field. Kyle Hamilton, even if he's not being tested, erases numbers to numbers more than 15 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. Anything in that ginormous range of football field is fair game and is realistic for Kyle Hamilton to go make a play. He's not going to get tested a lot. He's going to absolutely erase 70% of the middle of the field for the Detroit Lions. And it's going to leave the opposing quarterback with the choice of testing Kyle Hamilton in the middle, an all-pro caliber cornerback in Amani Oruwariye on the boundary, or former 3rd overall pick Jeff Okudah on the boundary, who honestly didn't look that bad in his limited playing time in 2021, right? Had 2 passes defended, and really the only catch he gave up was an underthrown ball that Deebo Samuel, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, simply adjusted to just a little bit better than and was able to stay on his feet. Yeah, everybody's going to say, okay, Jeff Okudah's a bust. He didn't play well. Jeff Okudah played really well in that first game. He gave up 1 catch because it was an underthrown ball that Deebo Samuel just adjusted better to. That's the only ball. That's the only catch Jeff Okudah gave up in that game. And he had 2 passes defended in that game. One was a diving pass breakup on 3rd down, and the other one was just a really good technique. Stayed with the wide receiver and got a nice pass. Right, not to mention you're welcoming back Romeo Okwara, who had 16 pressures in just 4 games a season ago for the Detroit Lions. You're expecting, obviously, Aleem McNeil and Levi Onwuzurike to develop and grow and become better, especially Levi Onwuzurike as a pass rusher. And this edge rushing class is super deep. This edge rushing class is stupidly stacked with with, just pass rushers and run stoppers, whatever you need, you can find late in the first round, early in the second round. Heck, you could even find them late in the third round on day 2 and get a quality day 1 starting edge rusher for the Detroit Lions to replace Trey Flowers. Or you can stick with Julian Okwara, who's shown flashes of his own right? Or Charles Harris, who is coming off a 7.5, 8 sack season for the Detroit Lions. Edge rusher isn't your biggest position. Safety is your biggest position of need. And when the best player maybe ever at his position is sitting there at number 2, how do you not warrant taking him? Now, the biggest argument against Kyle Hamilton is going to be his positional value. And I can already read the comments saying, safety can't be taken number 2. Nobody's ever taken safety number 2. If the Lions take a safety at number 2, it's going to be just like Jeff Okudah again. First off, Jeff Okudah is not a bad player. He's had injury concerns, and in the time he played under Aaron Glenn and Aubrey Pleasant, he looked pretty good. Number 2, Kyle Hamilton is not Jeff Okudah. Kyle Hamilton is a generational talent and a generational safety that plays 3 different positions on the football field and can play any role you want him to play in a defense. And number 3, safety is arguably one of the most important positions on the field because they are tasked with covering the most ground and they are tasked with being the last line of defense for a defense. You know who gave Tom Brady the most trouble in his career? It wasn't Lawrence Taylor. It wasn't Von Miller. It wasn't Aaron Donald. It was Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu. You asked the greatest quarterbacks of all time, Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, who the hardest players to play against were and which players they hated the absolute most to play against, and their response every single time is Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu. You ask Bill Belichick, the greatest coach of all time, who coached Lawrence Taylor, who the best defensive player was that he had to coach against, and he says Ed Reed. He says Troy Polamalu. Those guys are safeties. Those guys make plays down the field. And those guys, just like Kyle Hamilton, erase everything inside the numbers. So if anybody can come up with a real reason outside of positional value that is a reason you shouldn't draft Kyle Hamilton at number 2, I would love to hear it because I'm not seeing a reason. Kyle Hamilton is the best player in the class. He will have the biggest impact out of anybody in this draft class for the Detroit Lions, and he is simply the best player available. Not to mention, safety is the number 1 position of need for the Detroit Lions this offseason. So with all that being said, that is all for you guys today. Let me know what you guys think about Kyle Hamilton. Let me know what you guys think about the safety out of Notre Dame. Would you draft him at number 2? Because if you're not getting him at number 4. I'll tell you that. I don't think Kyle Hamilton drops out of the top 3. You need to take him at 2, or you're going to be willing to pass on a generational talent yet again if you're the Detroit Lions. So with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching. Again, let me know your thoughts on Kyle Hamilton down in the comments below. But with all that being said, that is all for you guys today. Thank you so very much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions!